Welcome to another episode of React Roundup. I am your temporary host, Thomas Aylott, and today on the panel you have me, hello, and Dave Cedia as well. And our guest today is, I want to say Håkon Krogh, but I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. Can you correct us?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, that's close. As close as an American can get.
There you go.
One of the things that I find that we talk a lot about at the different conferences and the different things that I'm working on is open source software. And a lot of people have a lot of ideas around open source software, but we don't often think about the people who are building it and trying to maintain it. I had a friend, John, who came to me. He's been a guest on JavaScript Jabber a couple of times. He came and he actually said, "Hey, Chuck, I wish there was a show about sustaining open source." That really hit me where I live. And I have a few other friends who are working on projects related to this. So we all got together and we put together a show called Sustain Our Software. You can find it at sustainoursoftwarepodcast.com. It's a place where several people who are passionate about open source come together and have conversations about how it can be sustained and how it can be maintained and what we can do to help these maintainers continue to deliver us value that we build our software on. Most of the software we're building is based on open source, and so it's important to us to have that maintained and have it taken care of. Come check it out. It's been really interesting to listen to the conversations that they're having from people who are working in it all the time and just hear what they have to say about it. Once again, that's at sustainoursoftwarepodcast.com.
Okay, cool. So I was watching your lightning talk at React Amsterdam, and I didn't get a chance to finish it, but you were getting into some interesting stuff about kind of the difference between like time to interactive and like the first paint, and as well as like the Uncanny Valley. Could you kind of give us a brief glimpse of what that was all about?
Oh, yeah. The talk that I gave was really focused on the term Uncanny Valley. It does apply to not only React, but in React terms, it does apply on typically when you do server-side rendering stuff. So if you only do a single page application, this is not really a big concern of yours. But if you do SSR, then the Uncanny Valley is something that you should be focusing about. Like the whole thing is when we do server-side rendering on React, we're so good with the guests of the websites. Like we pre-render everything on the server. We just send them the HTML, the CSS, and everything. And it's immediately ready, right? It's a perfect win. And then after that, we get to boot up React and use all the magic inside that so we can create awesome interactive experiences. So, brings the best out of both worlds, like the traditional old school way of doing stuff and like the new modern stack. So
yeah, server-side rendering has like seriously improved things in a lot of ways. It's still so early on that we haven't really started to understand kind of the trade-offs and the pitfalls.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there are tons of pitfalls with SSR. One of the most basic ones are, you're now relying on the speed of your server. So you can't really handle a lot of requests at a time. And I know, so if you're using Next.js, they've kind of have solved this by splitting up all the routes into lambdas. So that's not really a big deal anymore. They can handle a lot of traffic.
Yeah, that scales out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. It's not really necessarily the fastest, but scale good. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, then the other big pitfall is that the clients or the end users are getting into this Uncanny Valley, this mysterious place. Like Uncanny Valley, I think you can look it up on Wikipedia, but in essence, it's how to best describe it. Yeah,
I've heard the term before applied to like art. There's art that looks like art, and then there's like art that looks like a photograph. But if it's like somewhere in between, where it's like it doesn't exactly look like photorealistic, and it doesn't look exactly like a cartoon or whatever, it's just like it gives you this weird sense of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so something that's almost right, but it's not. But then, so when we apply this on the web, I think we're not using this term correctly, because what we present to the users are the actual, it's the painted HTML. It's the buttons, it's the fonts, it's everything that you need. As a user, they don't think, well, this doesn't look right. For them, it looks perfectly all right. So that's why I'm not really a big fan of that expression. That's why we kind of made up our own. When I try to explain what the Uncanny Valley is, I try to, reference it to something that people know, and then I usually get into like the the Road Runner cartoon. Do you remember that?
Yeah, with Wile E. Coyote and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's probably in every episode, I don't know, but I remember one of them where the Roadrunner was running towards a mountain and then painted a tunnel, the entrance of a tunnel, and it ran into that tunnel, right? And the coyote came after and just got totally destroyed because it ran into the mountain, not the tunnel, right? And this is essentially what the Uncanny Valley is on the web. Because we're painting this awesome picture of a tunnel entrance, but when people try to use that tunnel entrance, it doesn't work. They're not getting as many injuries as the coyote there.
Yeah, that's a perfect metaphor. It looks like it looks like a perfect web page, but none of the buttons work. Nothing actually does it.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is probably a better way to describe it, because if our end users really had an idea that it was like something's off with this web page, I should probably wait before I try to interact with it, then it would be okay. But they don't know. And that's also our sort of developers' sort of passion too, is to try to make it as good as possible on the SSR side. And then in the background, just secretly React and do all that kind of stuff. And then sometime in the future, it becomes interactive.
Yeah. And so when you're trying this out on your laptop, high-powered MacBook browser or whatever, it loads pretty fast, right? So it feels like it's working great. Yeah. And then you gave that example in your talk where you're trying this on underpowered smartphones and you end up with this really long delay where it just doesn't seem to work, and maybe it's broken or whatever.
Yeah. This is really hard to catch on, because when we develop websites, usually we're all on pretty high-powered devices. Even an old laptop is really powerful compared to a medium-sized, a couple of year-old cell phone. And a lot of people have those. And a medium or two, a kind of flaky 3G connection, it's a world of difference. The examples I have from my lightning talk is, we're sort of trying to estimate for how long we're lying on web pages. And on a standard Next.js application, which our own company website runs on, we're lying for around 6-7 seconds, I think. So we've confirmed this even on Wi-Fi on our office, because one of my colleagues has a semi-old Android, and they can't use our website until I think it's 10 seconds or something.
That's absolutely unacceptable. What can we actually do about it? So, there's number one is admitting that you have a problem. Yeah. Two is figuring out what is the scope of the problem, how bad is the problem, and then what can you actually do about it?
Yes. So step one of this, admitting that you have a problem, you have to start measuring your applications to find out if this is actually a problem. And there's not really one way of finding out, because there's probably one thing that you can do as a developer, and that's using Lighthouse. You can even go to Page Speed Insights on the web and just monitor any website. And you can take the look at the page speed index, because that's the time where it appears to be waiting for the user. And you can look at the time to interactive and look at the difference. So page speed insights usually happens before time to interactive. And if you can get those as close as you possibly can, that's going to be your optimal result. So I guess in a perfect situation, they will be equal. So at the moment it appears to be ready for the users is the moment it's actually ready to. So it's kind of hard to achieve that in real life. It is possible theoretically, just by sending raw HTML with no CSS, no images, and no JavaScript.
I'll get right on that.
Back to the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
Back then, it works really fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so back then we didn't have that problem, because once you had your HTML and your small amount of CSS and maybe your 1 or 2 images, you're done. And back then you didn't really have that much JavaScript either. So yeah.
I guess the two directions you can go to solve this is, one, on the technical side, actually making the same experience just load faster, get progressive in how you split things up. But another side is the user experience side of letting the designers be really intentional about designing the progressive loading experience. With Facebook, some articles will show up, but it's not the actual content. It's fake content, and it shimmers while it's loading. So separating the loading of the application skin and the content and stuff like that. But that's kind of in the wheelhouse. Well, I guess it's kind of the blur between engineering and design at that point.
Yeah. But I like that approach better than lying. I mean, just showing those blurred outlines of elements, you're admitting that you didn't really make a super fast application, or it takes time to load data. But at least you're not lying. So,
right.
Yeah, at least you can tell as a user that it's doing something. I just need to wait a little bit longer.
To me, I mean, it's an acceptable solution for some things. But then again, if you want to run an SSR application, you really don't have that option. So there's SEO implications in this too. So the reason why many people want to do SSR is performance and SEO. So the Googlebot and other crawlers, they do execute JavaScript, but if you have an SSR rendered application, it's gonna get higher rankings on search engines, most probably. So if you want to, be at the top of your game and be really visible online, then SSR is just like the way to go. And then, well, if you have an SSR application and you just serve them blurred sort of outlines of the layout, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't provide any value.
Yeah, that's more of a valid thing for like an application where you're not interested in being crawled by Google.
Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit to that question of like, where should you use React and where should you like maybe just use plain old HTML or something. It seems like for static pages that are mostly static, like a blog or something like that, you want a static version first, and then maybe you can sort of sprinkle in some JavaScript afterwards, speed things up or make it more whatever. But you want that initial load to be pretty much just text, because that's pretty much all the page is.
So we're discussing SSR because, well, you have awesome tools like Gatsby, right? That can generate static HTML. But those don't always work in all scenarios. Sometimes your content changes dynamically and really fast and really often. So you need something dynamically rendered, which is why we have Next.js and friends. So I've been working a lot with really ambitious e-commerce solutions in the past. And up until 3 years ago, we didn't touch React. It wasn't even an option. It wasn't fast enough at the time. And the server-side rendering stuff of React wasn't good enough. It wasn't sort of mainstream enough for us to use it. It was only when Next.js was released that kind of opened the door for us to say, okay, maybe we'll look into SSR now. Because if you're running a really ambitious e-commerce solution, you do need SSR. There's just no way around that.
Absolutely.
But Next.js and basically Zeit sort of changed the game totally, completely. So now it is possible to do that, but we're running into situations now where we're doing SSR, we're getting all the cool SEO benefits, but the clients have to pay the price in terms of the Uncanny Valley and a longer time perspective.
So, what are the kind of ambitious things that you're trying to do that require SSR and that make the loading time slow? When I think e-commerce, I think like Amazon.com and stuff like that.
Yeah, Amazon, that's what we all think about when e-commerce, right? So there's obviously tons of other web shops out there, both B2B sites, B2C. As long as you want to be really visible on the web and not sort of use Amazon, sort of make your own thing, then this really comes into play. If you have a niche company, selling, I don't know, metal teddy bears or something, then you definitely want to get highly ranked on all of your preferred search terms, right? So then it does matter a lot.
Yeah, and it seems like the SEO thing, it's sort of two angles too. I mean, you have to sort of appease Google or whoever, mostly Google, by having content that it can parse, but also you want to make it the best user experience, because it seems like at least like a non-trivial chunk of that SEO sort of ranking, I think, is whether users come to your page and stay there versus whether they come and they get frustrated and hit the back button. I think Google can tell if you land on a page and you hit back fast enough that maybe no one wants this site or it's not serving them well enough or whatever. I think it'll derank it that way.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. They do rank you on a bunch of different parameters. So, but performance is now one of the biggest ones. And fortunately, we can get some insights in how they rank. So if you check out, so in DevTools, basically you have the audit panel and you make a performance audit on your own page, SEO too. But then they'll tell you how you rank, and they'll actually tell you like which metric and how they weight in when they do page rankings in Google. So we have all the tools at hand now to help our clients.
I saw something really interesting the other day where someone was making the case that running Lighthouse in a browser is not the same as running Lighthouse from a lower powered device like a phone or something, because like the scores will come out lower on the lower powered device. I don't know if that's a commonly known thing, or I don't know. It was news to me, so I don't know. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. When you run Lighthouse emulations on your MacBook, it tries to sort of emulate a slow device, but it's only emulation, right? So it's all up to how you implement that emulation. So yeah, it's not going to be the same. And you're going to get a different score if you're running an even lower powered device.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not really something that's easy, and there's no like one answer to this. But in essence, so if you do want to improve on the Uncanny Valley, like, so you want to ensure that when your customers or when your end user enter, when they enter your site, the first thing to do is to ensure that they have a way to use your site, even though they're sort of in this Uncanny Valley. So let's say you're presenting, you're running an e-commerce and you have this wonderful product, the monstrous big buy button, click me, buy me, right? And then you want to ensure that any end user entering your site and like having the cash burning in their wallet, like that they can actually give you the money for this teddy bear.
That sounds important.
Yeah. Even though they're in the Uncanny Valley, right? So you have to provide some fallbacks for that, so that even though like none of the React stuff is ready, you can still use the button. You can still buy the teddy bear. And as a user, you don't really care if it's a good old-fashioned HTML forms of it, or if it's an on-submit callback in React, right? They don't care. They want the teddy bear.
Yeah. So is like one way to fix that would be to just use regular anchor tags that actually go to a URL. So if React hasn't sort of enhanced that link or button yet, that it'll still work. Like the browser still knows what to do with it, right?
Yeah. In order to provide decent fallbacks for any scenario, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So, page navigation, that kind of thing is more or less fixed with tools like Next.js. But the other part of fixing this with, stuff like, purchasing stuff online, that requires a backend that can take care of your basket items and all that. If you want to provide a good fallback, you actually have to do a bit more backend stuff to sort of help this thing along.
There's one pattern that started to be talked about a lot, which is the kind of the micro front ends, where people are mixing in multiple different kinds of apps on the front end. That could be one strategy for splitting things up, where you're using SSR for like one part of the app and everything else kind of dynamically loads after the first refresh.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way you want to handle things specifically is up to you. I mean, I really like the micro front end approach because it allows you to iterate fast and you can sort of scale things independently. That is really good. But if your SSR part still is sort of giving out or presenting really critical elements on the page, something that you would expect users to click and interact on, then you still have to provide some really good fallbacks in the end. So on the lightning talk, I think I quoted someone from Netflix because they were trying to sort of fix this problem on their front page. I think it's 2 years ago. It's not even new. And they decided to do server-side rendered React on the back end. And then on the front end, they would just serve the HTML and the CSS, but no React, nothing. It's like the pure web tech there. And then they would, for the JavaScript thing they did need, they would just write that vanilla, but really like as compact and as tiny as possible. So that's a really interesting approach. And this is something that will have a massive effect on the Uncanny Valley, because let's face it, like the time to interactive, a big portion of that is just executing the JavaScript that we as developers sort of force you as a user to consume. So if you can reduce the size of your bundles or just remove them entirely, you're not going to lie to your end users anymore. Not as much.
The best code is no code.
Yes, exactly.
It's no code. Yeah, it's a really interesting approach, that idea of, I mean, pretty much using React as your server-side templating language at that point. Like, just, back to the good old days of server rendering before it was called SSR.
Old school.
Like the server returns the HTML, the browser just renders it, and that's it.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open source Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like sometimes when I talk about this topic too, especially new developers coming in, it's like man, you're like a dinosaur. Come on.
So you have a frame set and a marquee. You ain't.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, maybe I am, but still, it's like, to be honest, I don't really care about the tech as long as the user experience is good. I was helping out a colleague now. They wanted to achieve really, really good performance in one application, and we looked at their product, at their webpage, and it turned out that like the main sort of portal into their application was a page that didn't really have any JavaScript. It was just sub pages. We booted up like the entire application with React and all, and that just had a massive improvement in performance.
Oh yeah,
because first of all, the HTML that we sent was way smaller because we didn't have to include the React state.
Right.
So reducing it to like 6 kilobytes, which was awesome.
Nice.
And then when the client receives that and just paints that out, it's done. There's nothing more to wait for. And obviously that cannot work for any site. It's very, very few places where that can work, but if it can, it's wonderful. A different, more realistic thing to do is sort of looking at your bundle and trying to reduce the stuff that can be reduced. Or, if you're using stuff like Moment.js for data handling, this is a very known thing, right? There's alternatives that are less and kilobytes and might save you a bit of time in the end. And the same goes for stuff like GraphQL. We're purely using GraphQL over here, and
nice.
So we defer to using Apollo because everyone's using Apollo. So of course we are too. And we found out that switching out, like replacing Apollo with a lighter client, reduces the time to interactive by 300 milliseconds in our case, which is a significant amount of time, to be honest. And it's a really small change in the code base if you have that option, right? So it's about sort of finding the places where you can improve and measure before and after, like what's the change, what's the benefits.
It's also super specific to whatever you're trying to build. Like there's no silver bullet, there's no one size fits all. There are really awesome techniques as far as like, Webpack, where you can dynamically load the code that you need as you need it when you get to that part of your application. But then, one feature of React that people forget exists is that you don't have to do everything in React. Like you can have the majority of your content be just static and then use React just for some widget on the page or just for like stuff that isn't necessary until, they've been on the page for 30 seconds or more or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. When we think of a React application, we think, okay, everything's going to be React, like everything, rendering the entire HTML and all. So yeah, you're totally right. That's something that we probably can explore a bit more too. So
actually how React started.
Yeah.
I guess it also ties in with that micro front end idea, right? Like maybe not having multiple front end frameworks, but you just have the one or something, but it's only controlling parts of the page. Yeah.
And Thomas, you touched upon an interesting thing too. I mean, you mentioned Webpack and bundles, and there's also, I think, approach like emerging now is like the idea of shipping different JavaScript for different browsers.
Yes.
So right now, most of the time, we're shipping a monster big JavaScript file. So, and it's the transpiled version that works all the way down to IE4 or something.
Here you go.
Yeah, there we go. So, and I know there's some effort done right now from Next.js and Google. I think they're in. You want to, kind of make the solution in the tools for this one, so that by default they're going to, split the bundles up. You get one modern one that is not as transpiled as the kind of legacy one. And this is really good. This is where we wanted to be. I remember when Babel was introduced to the market, I was like, yes, we can finally use the new features. And sometime in the future, I can just skip Babel. Well, yeah. I know now I can never. I'm married to Babel all my life. I mean,
right.
Yeah. At least we can turn off some of the transpiling now for.
The big problem there is the NPM, having like currently most NPM modules expose a transpiled ES5 code base. And then there's like competing specs for how you can expose, well, here's the ES5 version, here's the X6, here's the JS modules code, here's like, oh, good grief.
Yeah, that's true. So like when it comes time to bundle your modules, they're already kind of compiled into a way that you'd have to go backwards and recompile them all or something. Interesting.
Yeah, like a reverse transpiling.
Yeah. Like compile everything from scratch, back to olden days again.
Personally, I love TypeScript. I switched to TypeScript a couple years ago. I switched back to Flow temporarily because of necessity, but long term, I really want like all my code to be actually TypeScript, even all my NPM modules to actually be actual TypeScript. And once we have that, or at least, something that's halfway there, there's so much cool stuff that we can do on the compiler side of things, like with all of the type hinting to do all kinds of nerd compiler nonsense that smarter people than me tend to spend their time on.
We also have React-like alternatives for those that want to try out different stuff too. I mean,
Preact.
Exactly. So there's also like stuff like Inferno. There's, what's the other one's called? I don't know. There's a bunch of alternatives that are with the API that are closely, really close to the ones in React. So once you know React, there's really, there's nothing stopping you for trying something else if you're really, really passionate about performance.
Yeah, I love that philosophy. Learn once, write everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. The idea you can learn React and then go write React Native or whatever. And then we've got all these nice spin-off libraries that are like Preact is 3 kilobytes or something, right? So that saves a ton of space right there. Maybe.
I think he's like hand coding it with like bytecode now. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he like rewrote it in like Rust or something just to get the bytes down by 3 more bytes. That guy's awesome.
Oh yeah. So Jason Miller, right? That's the guy we're talking about.
Develop it. So
I think he's part of the team that helps out with some Next.js features too.
Oh really? That's cool.
Think so, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so there are some great initiatives, happening on the tooling side of things. It's not just that we can sit back and relax and wait for everything to be solved for us, which would be awesome. But we kind of have to deal with this. At least some of us. I mean, if you're just running as single page applications, right, you don't really have to worry about this kind of thing.
That's why measuring is so critical. Like if it's really taking 10 seconds before people can start using your thing, it's like, your thing sucks. Fix your thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely something that a lot of people should be focusing on. And some of the work that you have to do as a developer is not just, doing the actual work, but it's sort of convincing the management that you have to do this work. It's really difficult sometimes to get them to get your management to be on board with, okay, we want to spend more time on testing to make our application more resilient.
Accessibility.
Yeah.
Internationalization.
Yeah, right. So in the end, I mean, if you want to convince your boss, management, whoever, that you need to spend more time on this thing called the Uncanny Valley, they're not going to get it.
Yeah, it needs a better name than that. It's the valley of people being able to give us money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess
the valley where people hit the back button, right? People just leave.
Yeah,
Back button valley.
Back button valley. I think was this Paul Irish? I remember Adios Money, who was never, and they have some excellent talks on this, especially Adios Money lately. They've been doing some really cool blog posts and talks about this kind of problem specifically, and they talk about the click frenzy, like when you click a button and then nothing happens. Yeah, and they keep clicking and like in despair because they're really hoping that it's going to end up with something in the end, like, or that you just purchased 100 teddy bears. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, that is such a problem. I've definitely experienced that. It's just like the madly clicking a button.
Swath of humanity that is literally terrified of their computers because they don't know what's happening. They're worried that they're going to accidentally buy it 10 times, that the thing is just going to stop working because they clicked the wrong button. Yeah, and it's our fault with crap like this.
Exactly. This is actually the core of the problem because as a web developer, I sort of tend to think that I'm writing the applications for like-minded people.
Right.
Not that I think that I'm doing that. I never sort of stop to think about who's going to actually use the system.
Right.
But in the end, in humanity, it's your neighbor next door and it's your grandmother. And all these people, they have no idea. Like they have no idea of these concepts. And they're maybe, as you say, maybe they're a bit scared of the internet. Yeah, scared that people like just by entering their like the web, like the address and the URL and in the address bar, like, at that moment their credit card is going to get emptied. They don't know,
right? And they're not wrong. Like there's websites that do that.
Yeah, and they might not even be patient. And again, if you're running, this is specifically for e-commerce because it's so highly competitive. So if people enter your e-commerce and are maybe a bit stressed, tired, right? And then the first thing they see is a loading spinner. They're going to get, screw this, I'm going somewhere else. Yeah. I mean, we sort of have to be as friendly as we can with our end users and make sure that, we don't lie, at least to them.
There's so many wonderful things that you can do. Like if we spend the time to make them have a really, really good experience, then they're going to, the same kind of dynamic that makes them fear and hate things will make them love and gravitate towards our things in subconscious ways that they don't even realize.
Yeah, I think that idea of like trying to sell it to your boss, I think it all comes down to the users. You know, if you're making your users happy, that probably makes the business more money. And if you can sort of tie it that way, be like, well, fewer people will hit the back button and more people will buy stuff. So like we need time to spend on this thing.
Yeah, exactly. If you can relate your work to money, that's gonna sell always.
Yeah, the React was started on the ads team. It's always been very close to the money.
There you go.
So on a completely other note, like what else is going on in the React community that's kind of piquing your interest right now?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I mean, I'm really loving hooks, to be honest. I know everyone says that, but come on. It simplifies things so much. I've been doing a lot of mentoring for colleagues of mine, and everything just went so much easier now with hooks.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be that fun. I was kind of resistant at the start. I was like, nah, I'm not sure I like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like dark magic. I'm not sure I'm into it.
Yeah.
That kind of feeling at first.
I had the same feeling. Yep.
Yeah, no, but it really is awesome. Even though it kind of makes it a bit more difficult to explain lifecycle methods, the class-based, like the class approach is easier in that sense because you have named lifecycle methods. This one is kind of a bit more vague in that sense, but in the end,
I think that's intentional. I think they want to be able to get away from the idea of the lifecycle, at least a little bit.
Anyway, so that's one thing, but I'm also really I really love that the way we move toward like the SSR part of React, like that community is getting big now, and it's getting a lot of attention and focus. And I'm really excited to see what comes out of. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Next.js, so I'm not going to lie there.
Yeah,
they're doing some awesome work, and I know that I think I saw on Twitter last week or something that they're gonna ship this like the different bundles for different devices thing.
Oh, right.
Soon, yeah.
Oh, they're actually doing that.
They're actually doing that.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping up with like what's new with Next. I know Next, 9 or 6 or something like that, just came out a few weeks or months ago. I don't know. What's new with that thing? I remember it was like so much better, but I don't remember what was different.
It just keeps getting better, I guess. So now it's possible to do. You can do so. You can integrate your backend more easily now. So you have your own API subfolder that you can do stuff on.
All right.
It's so good. Yeah. But yeah, there's also tons of other improvements. There's just so many contributors now to Next. So that's awesome.
This episode is sponsored by GitLab Commit. GitLab's inaugural user event brings together the GitLab community to connect, learn, and inspire. Speakers will showcase the power of DevOps in action through strategy and technology decisions, lessons learned, behind-the-scenes looks at the development lifecycle, and more. Learn how to innovate the future of software development by registering today. GitLab Commit Brooklyn, September 17th, and GitLab Commit London, October 9th. You can find it at devchat.tv/GitLab Commit.
All right, so I guess now is time for picks. Dave, do you have anything to pick?
Sure, yeah. So I've got one cool tool that I found. It's called FX. It's pretty much, if you've seen that JQ tool, it's for parsing, formatting jQuery, especially at the command line. It's a command line tool, so you can fetch some JSON from did I say jQuery? Fetch some JSON from somewhere and format it with JQ. FX is like that, but it's like an interactive one, so you can browse through things and you can write little JavaScript expressions at the command line to sort of parse out the responses from the server and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Just check out. I think it's actually fx.wtf will bring you to the Git.
Sure, why not?
I'll paste the link in the show notes. And there's another sort of relevant to what we've been talking about today. There's a site called microjs.com. And this is not a new thing. This has been around for years, but it's like a searchable list of tiny little JavaScript libraries. So if you need some sprinkle of JavaScript and you don't want to have to write some, it's got like tiny HTTP libraries and some animation stuff and all this different sorts of stuff that trying to make fast sites and trying to stay away from React for certain pages or something might be a good look.
Cool.
Yeah. My pick for today is a physical book that I picked up at the bookstore the other day. Mindset by Carol Dweck, PhD. That's the one that first talked about like a growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Like applying that to technology, we tend to just assume that things just are the way they are. Like the performance is the way that it is. There's nothing we can do about it. But like no matter what it is in life, we can always take a step forward. We might not be able to jump a mile forward in some random direction, but we can always improve the performance somehow. And if it feels like it's completely stuck, it's just like you're not thinking about it in the right way. And just change your perspective.
Yeah, cool. So my pick is, I'm not sure if it's been mentioned here, but it fits really nice with the performance and scheme of the day. It's bundledphobia.com. It's a website where you can search, like if you have an NPM package and you're not quite sure how big it is, like how big impact will this have in the bite size of your code.
Nice.
Bundledphobia is an excellent tool to help you see that. And it also gives you a trend. So you can sort of cherry pick the version that is like the smallest one. Yeah, and it's really nice. And for some packages, some popular ones, it gives you okay, this package is like similar to these packages, like these other ones. So it's a way to navigate the NPM landscape too.
Awesome.
That's super cool. I think that wraps it up for this episode of React Roundup. I guess that rounds it up or whatever. I'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.